Hi, Smarter News. Today we're going to start off with a great historical story that quite literally will give us the foundation to talk about some other big headlines that deal with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is what America's all about. So today in history, in 1792, George Washington lays the cornerstone to the White House. And this came about where the White House was going to be, where the capital of this new nation would be, was really a topic of big debate and quite a bit of compromise. We have a little bit of a deeper dive on our website to detail some of the backstory to this, but a couple of things strike me about this particular story as we take a look at a historical drawing of the White House. The White House wasn't actually white at the time it was being built. I know, wait, what? Have we been living a lie? No, the sandstone that was actually used for the White House was not white. It was sort of gray. It had streaks of yellow or tan or red. And in fact, it didn't wear very well. And so later on, it actually had to be treated and it became the color that we now know it as today. And it became to be referred to as the White House. So many different parts of this story mean so much and give us such a symbolic perspective, not only symbolic perspective on what we've experienced as a nation, but also teach us a lot about our country's history. The War of 1812 happened just a few years after the American Revolution, and the British actually burned part of the White House. This is part of the story that I often forget. The War of 1812 is sort of one of those wars that's almost forgettable, right? We don't talk about it a lot, but it was a real challenge to the new nation and quite frankly almost took down this building that you're looking at. It didn't. The White House survived, the nation survived, and it's continued with some retrofitting and a little redecorating. And so the White House has stood. So interesting perspective to have during a time that we've been challenged on so many different levels. Maybe the White House gives us a little bit of perspective into the endurance that is also a part of America, along with conflict and a lot of public debate. And that's something we see in our other big headlines. So what we're going to look at today is a couple key cases, two cases that have to do with the pandemic, one case that has to do with the historic terrorist attack that the Supreme Court is hearing a case about today. So let me start off first with what's going on with the pandemic. This is specifically about vaccine mandates. These are two very different cases, but important just to note altogether. They're about the vaccine mandates that we're seeing. Here's a big umbrella. Again, going back to foundation, umbrella that we should understand of knowledge when it comes to vaccine mandates. Yes, you've heard that there is precedent for vaccine mandates, legal precedent. That is true. There's also legal precedent for exemptions. And that's why depending on where you live, what school district you're in, you might see different exemptions for vaccines. Sometimes those exemptions are very, very narrow and hard to get. Sometimes they are very wide. Sometimes there's medical exemptions. Sometimes there's religious exemptions. They're different. But in some of these vaccine mandates that we've seen for private companies or in states, there have been no allowances for exemptions. Or if there's an allowance for exemption, it's led to a result that has then led to a lawsuit. So an example, United Airlines. Several United Airlines employees are suing the company because they appealed for a medical or religious exemption, sometimes both. And in appealing for that, they were actually put on unpaid leave. And they're saying, listen, you're not trying to accommodate us. You're actually essentially terminating us. You're putting us in an adverse employment situation. And so this case is ongoing. A judge just yesterday very temporarily ruled on the side of the employees, saying that they shouldn't be put on unpaid leave. So that's something to know. We'll see how this case develops because this could be really important in the airline industry or otherwise. In the other case, we're watching out of New York, healthcare workers sued and said we should be able to appeal for a religious exemption to our employers, which are these hospitals that are trying to follow the state mandate for vaccines. And a judge in that case temporarily ruled in favor of the employees, saying that they're not getting proper accommodation. So these are going to be really interesting stories to watch, although these are temporary. I really want you to know these are very temporary, very limited victories for those that are challenging these mandates that aren't allowing these exemptions. But it is happening. This is part of the story, and this is important to note. Two things I'm really curious about. One is the status of a health emergency. Under the umbrella of a health emergency, the government is able to do a variety of different things. We see that in an emergency use authorization, for example, for different treatments for COVID-19. We're seeing that used as part of justification for these mandates. The question is, when do we move past a health emergency? What would that look like even in the course of a legal case? Could that change? And could that affect how a judge is going to rule potentially for either side? That's number one. Number two, in both of these cases, in New York for healthcare workers and also for United Airlines, reports suggest that the vaccination rates among employees are extremely high. In some cases, more than 90%. So we're talking about a very, very small percentage of people that are requesting the exemption that are meeting roadblocks that they say are illegal. And that's also interesting. I'm wondering how that factors in. If the goal is to get a broad percentage of the public to be vaccinated, then does that affect also the ruling for the judges in either of these cases when they step back and see, well, what actually is the amount of people that are really appealing for exemption? What does that look like? So 2 cases to watch, really important. So let's get to the Supreme Court today. The Supreme Court today is going to be hearing a case about a convicted terrorist, the convicted terrorist at the center of the Boston Marathon bombing. The case is not about whether this terrorist is guilty. The conviction is not at issue. What's at issue is the sentence. This individual was sentenced to death. In a federal case, this is rare that we see the death penalty either sentenced or enforced. And in recent history, a death penalty hasn't actually led to execution. That changed under the Trump administration that took up federal executions again. So just a little background on that. What the Supreme Court is going to be hearing is whether or not the death penalty should stand. A appeals court, after the sentencing of this individual that led to the death penalty just last year, a federal judge in an appeals court said a couple things. He said that the jury wasn't properly screened for bias, and also said that some evidence on this terrorist's brother and a separate crime that the brother was allegedly involved in should have been allowed in this particular case. And by not allowing that evidence in, they struck down or overturned the death penalty. This individual would still spend his life in prison, but he would not be executed. The execution would not be his fate. There would still be a question about whether the execution would actually happen, but it was taken off the table. So under the Trump administration, the federal government said, no, absolutely not. We're going to continue to pursue the death penalty. We're going to the Supreme Court on this. But the Trump administration has a very different posture about the death penalty than the Biden administration. President Biden has come out against the death penalty. However, despite that, the Biden administration is still pursuing the death penalty in this case. So even though there's such contrast between these two administrations, here's one area where there's not. And there's a question about how the Supreme Court will rule here. So an interesting case on a lot of different levels. As I was reporting on this, though, I was recalling an interview that we had on Smarter News with a woman named Michelle LaRue. She'll correct me. Shelley will come in. Michelle joined me to tell me her experience at the Boston Marathon bombing, at the terrorist attack. She was one of the victims, the hundreds of victims in this particular terrorist attack that, again, you kind of think back on the history of what we remember, isn't necessarily the first one that comes to mind when you think of historic terrorist attacks in the country. This is something we talked about in our interview. So I asked her if she would join us today. Sorry, guys. I asked her if she would join us today. Let me go ahead and see if I can invite her in. Let's see. Let's see what we can do here. I'm going to see if we can get Michelle in and see if Michelle can give us a little bit of perspective. I think this is so special. Michelle, I called you Shelley. I think we're friends now.
That's okay.
I can do that.
Yes.
So it's great. It's so nice to see such a nice crowd here. We have so many of our supporters here, Stephanie and Carlos and everybody. And I'm so glad they're here to hear a little bit from you, because here's a headline that we have. I hope I mapped that out correctly. You know more about the legal cases and the way that it's evolved than I do. So please add any perspective. But as I was recovering this story, I just couldn't help but think of you and think of there's so many people that have been impacted by this case. And I'm just curious what you think about all of this. What is this like for you to see this case back in the Supreme Court?
I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. It makes me feel sad, and it makes me feel a little bit annoyed that we're back here again, um, you start to kind of forget about it and move on with your life as best you can, and then it comes back up, and it sort of something that keeps popping back up, now that he's appealing and this is going on. And I think it's difficult for everyone that we have to kind of go through it again, if you will. And
What
um,
what do you think justice looks like in this case? Do you think justice was served by the sentence that was given down by a jury of his peers?
I I feel that that what he received was what he deserved. I am not a big advocate for the death penalty. However, hold on, honey. You can in a few minutes, okay? Sorry.
This is life. This is who he
uh,
is. This is what happens. It's okay.
and it's birthday. He wants cake. I feel like he got what he deserved, and I'm not a big supporter of the death penalty. However, this is sort of him getting his way, if you will, by even being heard by the Supreme Court. And I have a really hard time. I think one of the big things for me with this case is I have a really hard time with the fact that they try to make it seem almost like Tamberlin has more accountability than he does.
So let me explain that. Just to pop in here. So you have two brothers, and I tend not to use the names of terrorists because it's once someone's convicted, it does
Yeah.
feel like you can elevate them to a certain status over the victims because we'll say their name over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over again, but we won't say the name of all
It's true.
260 plus people that are injured, or the three people that died during the attack, or the two law enforcement officers, one that died immediately following and the one that died a year after. We don't say their names. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, to be fair, as a journalist, I just want people to know that's my
Yep.
editorial call. I'm not trying to, it's not a crusade. This is just how I'm feeling about it. But just so that we have some perspective. So Johar and Tamerlan are brothers. Johar survived. Tamerlan did not. Tamerlan died in the chase to get away, okay, of this, trying to flee as a manhunt continued for them. Tamerlan apparently was involved, and we don't know, he was never tried for it. So this is why we have to say allegedly, was involved in some homicides in previous
Mm-hmm.
years. This all kind of comes out and unravels after the Boston Marathon, a terrorist attack. So this is all
Yes.
unraveling. This is all coming out. And what the lawyers are saying is that Tamerlan, because of his past, what they're saying for Johar is that he basically was the mastermind. Johar looked up to his older brother and therefore shouldn't be blamed as much,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, for the terrorist attack, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's the argument. And the
Yes.
judge said in the appeals case, yes, actually, I agree that this evidence should have come out. Prosecutors in the case were like, no way, this shouldn't come in because this is a separate crime. We don't even know if this guy
Mm-hmm.
was guilty for it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
going to totally confuse the jury. And if you're listening now, you can see why it could be confusing. So these were the
Yes.
two arguments. And so this is why we're at the Supreme Court. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so what you're saying when you said Tamerlan, I just wanted people to know that's the brother in this case that's
Yes.
no longer a survivor. Johar was 19 at the time. He's 28
Mm-hmm.
now. And he's the one that's appealing, basically
Yes.
at the heart of this appeal.
And to try to make it seem like he has somehow less responsibility for this because he was influenced, I just think back to when I was that age and I knew right from wrong. And if somebody told me to put a bomb down, I wouldn't do it. And not only did he choose to put a bomb down, but he chose to put it down next to children and then proceeded to go to the market and buy milk. And I have a really hard time with that. I think over the years, people do forget a little bit how serious it was. We just, over time, memories fade, and this was a really horrible attack. The things that I saw that day were indescribable. It has to be what war is like, and he doesn't deserve a second chance, in my opinion. And again, I'll say it again, I'm not a big advocate for the death penalty, but I don't think he should receive anything of what he wants. And I think there might be this perception that if he gets life in prison, that we won't hear from him anymore. And I just don't think that's true. He's even suing, the state of Colorado and the prison for, treatment he deems unfair. And, I think that's something we're always going to hear from him.
Here we have, how old is your son,
5.
Shelly?
So here, come here,
5.
True. You want to say hi? I'm still on Michelle. It's okay. Here, come here. Do you want to say hi? Hi. Hi.
Hi, True.
He's with Dad for a second. I said, "Oh, I just need a second,"
Oh, I
but
love
all
it.
these conversations. There it is. Thanks. He True likes to stay. He likes smarter news, right?
He does.
True.
He
He
does.
does. You want to? You can hang out there. Has motherhood changed your perspective on this at all, Michelle? Because it's as a mom, thinking now that you have a son that is not that much younger than the young boy that was killed in the
Yes.
attack, but
Yes.
also as a mother that you know this convicted criminal also has a mother. And
Mhm.
motherhood's complicated as it gives you perspective for a lot of different news stories.
It is. And I think, hold on, do you want to say hi? Do you want to say hi too? Can you say hi? Can you say hi?
Hi, is it your birthday? Is it a
You tell
birthday
her it's your
today?
birthday? He's like, I don't know about this. Um,
I
I
get it.
it,
I would be suspicious too. I get it.
it has changed my perspective because I do also think about, that could have been my son. He clearly did not have any issue with putting a bomb down next to little children. And that's a really hard pill for me to swallow. And I just, it, I have no sympathy for him. And
Yeah. How hard is this to experience? Is this a difficult day for you, Michelle? How do you even approach it?
I think
Or
that I don't hold any anger or anything. I try to I went running this morning, and honestly, when I was running, I was thinking, I appreciate my legs. I appreciate my body. I have, a very bad blast wound on my left leg. And when I was in the emergency room, I just kept saying, am I going to lose my leg? Because I saw people without limbs. And so in my mind, that was what I thought was going to happen to me. And so I think in a way, days like this, it makes me more appreciative of that I'm okay and that my body's okay and that it works. Um, but it is hard. I'm anxious to hear the arguments. Yeah.
yeah. One of the things we were exchanging yesterday, just so everyone knows, we did a longer interview. We were able to kind of work through what all the events of that day, and I'm going to tuck that interview into our newsletter this weekend because it's the way that you tell the story and it's so inspiring, Michelle. But as we were exchanging notes yesterday, because I thought, man, we're not hearing enough from the people that were there that day. You said something so profound, which is just that you didn't want people to forget. You could have different opinions
Mm-hmm.
on this story, but that
Yep.
it's that not to let it fade from our memories. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I just think that, over time, like I said, people forget, memories fade, but for the families and the survivors, it doesn't. It's something I think about multiple times a day, whether it's because of nerve pain or a noise I hear or just something I will see. And it's not an easy way to live all of the time. And you try to see the best in the world and you want to, and that there's way more good people in this world than people like this. Um, Happen. I think it's important that we remember because these people need support and this stuff, God forbid you don't want to see this happen again, but if it does, I think that it's important that we support those people and give them all that they need for as many years as it takes. Look at the people from 9/11. You can see there's still pain in their face. You can see at these anniversaries and these ceremonies, they're still hurting. Um, I don't think it ever leaves you. I don't think time does heal everything. I think you just figure out how to live with it. But I think it's important for others to remember that what we went through. And yeah.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And one thing I've learned from you is that you're not harboring hate all the time, but that
No,
doesn't mean that you forget it, and that
no.
you could carry both of those things at the same time. One of our
Mm-hmm.
audience members says this isn't just about this one guy's sentence. It sets a precedent for future terrorists
Yes.
to have a say
Mm-hmm.
in the consequences of their chosen actions. It sounds like that's something that you would agree with.
I very much agree with that. I think that we have to be really careful how we proceed with this because I mean, does this set a precedent? Does this set a precedent for violent extremist terrorists like this to be able to overturn? based on, his brother and what was omitted or what wasn't, or even like, jury selection. Like, I mean, how can you find people that have not heard of these things when they happen? So yeah, I think that it scares me for that fact. It also, it just, I don't know. I don't want him to get his way. I keep going back to that. I feel like you don't deserve, like, I was reading about how he was upset that he couldn't have more phone calls with members of his family, how it's affecting his mental health. And I just thought, what about the mental health of all of these people that you hurt? What about the mental health of the families of the people whose lives you took? Um, yeah, I think we need to
Yeah.
proceed with caution. And I truly hope that the Supreme Court reinstates the death penalty and we move on.
Well, we'll see. We won't see today. I want people to know
No.
that. So the arguments won't take place. We won't see today, but it'll be interesting to see. Sometimes people try to predict how the justices will rule based on the questions that they're going to ask. And so I know you're going to
Yeah.
be listening to the case. I know
Hmm.
you also have a birthday to obviously celebrate, which that we didn't know anything about. And so it was breaking news in the middle of this report. So do you have special plans for, is it a 5-year-old birthday today?
It's
Or
5-year-old birthday today. So,
that's a big
but
one.
he's homesick too. So we're trying to make it the best day we can. So lots of cake and presents later.
I
So
think that
yeah,
sounds perfect to me. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
a day at home with cake sounds like
It's
a
a good
win.
distraction after this. So
Yes,
it's,
it is.
I'll listen to this. We'll have our call with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then I will go in and enjoy my day with my son. And yeah. So, and I
It's hard not
appreciate.
to it's hard not to think about, the confluence of events. Like, what are the chances that this case falls on the date of your son's birthday, or it falls in the same week of the
I
125th
know,
running of the
I
Boston Marathon
know.
bombing, which happened on Monday? It's like that's always amazes me in news when you see these storylines interconnect and
Mhm.
intertwine. You're like, how is that even? You just it's beyond my own comprehension. I'll just say that.
When we received the date, I was like, how is that possible that it's the week of the marathon? That's, yeah, it was very crazy.
Yeah,
But it was a good marathon day though, and it was fun to have it in the fall. So, you know, yeah, we,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I
thank you,
just, I,
Michelle.
Jenna, I appreciate you bringing attention to this. And I know that I'm not the only survivor that would feel that way. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to share the story. And I think it's something that we can do a lot better as journalists. It's something I strive to do better, is that we do have to remember, and it's difficult. And it's a lot easy to distract ourselves with other things. But
Yeah.
if we don't face the facts as they are, then we're not doing service to the story. And the story really matters, and your perspective matters. So thank you, Michelle. I
Thank you,
won't tell
Jenna.
everyone about how we had to do like a couple Instagram live trials, because we're like, but we're not going to get any jobs at Facebook anytime soon. But fingers crossed that this
No.
interview saves and we're going to be okay.
Well,
Thank you,
thank God I had
Michelle.
your help. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jenna.
no, thank you
Bye.
so much. It's great to see you. Thank you so much.
Oh, bye.
Oh gosh, it's so nice to see Michelle, and you will hear more of her story in our newsletter. I also asked if she had any, is there any place that we could help, and so she had some suggestions. I'm going to put those in our newsletter as well. So hope this was helpful for you guys, a little bit different than our regular reports in the morning, but and not without, life happening around us. But I appreciate you rolling with us because, real life, real news. That's how it goes, right? If you have any questions or comments, please add them, and we'll have more on all of this, including updates on these big cases on smartnews.com. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you soon.